the cosmos silently carrying the hopes, data, and memories of a distant Earth. Scientists expected nothing more than the steady decline of signals as its systems aged and its power faded. And yet, just when they thought Voyager 1 had entered its final chapter, something truly unprecedented occurred. The spacecraft changed its course, not as a response to a command from Earth, not as the result of mechanical failure, but seemingly of its own volition. Even more disturbingly, just days before this shift in trajectory, Voyager 1 picked up a low-frequency hum, a sound with no identifiable origin, no match in NASA's records, and no scientific explanation. And now, with its antenna still pointed at Earth, Voyager is heading back, or being pulled. What did it encounter in the darkness? What did it see that made it turn? To understand how extraordinary this moment truly is, we must return to the beginning. In 1977, NASA launched two spacecraft, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, originally designed to take advantage of a rare planetary alignment that occurs only once every 176 years. The mission was meant to perform a grand tour of the outer planets, using the gravitational slingshot effect of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune to propel the probes deeper into the solar system. Voyager 1 was tasked with flying by Jupiter and Saturn, capturing the first-ever close-up images of their moons and rings. The images it sent back in the late 70s and early 80s redefined planetary science. Volcanoes erupting on Io, the complex ring structures of Saturn, the mysterious haze of Titan, and so much more. But once it had completed its planetary mission, Voyager 1 kept going. It passed beyond the orbit of Pluto, beyond the heliosphere, and into interstellar space, a region never before touched by human technology. With each passing year, it sent back less data but held on to one unshakable purpose: to continue exploring, even as its systems grew colder and weaker, even as the light from our sun became a memory rather than a presence. 4 decades, Voyager 1 transmitted signals back to Earth, mostly weak, heavily delayed packets of data about plasma density, magnetic fields, and cosmic rays. But on a quiet day, deep into its 46th year in space, its instruments registered something they had never detected before: a faint, continuous hum buried within the plasma wave frequencies. At first, scientists believed it was interference or malfunction in the aging instruments. But when the same reading appeared repeatedly and was verified by multiple antennas in the deep space network, concerns grew. The sound resembled no known space phenomenon. It wasn't cosmic background radiation, it wasn't a solar flare, and it wasn't coming from any direction they could triangulate. More hauntingly, it seemed to fluctuate in perfect mathematical intervals, like a message that wasn't meant to be heard, but recorded. For weeks, engineers and astrophysicists pored over the data, cross-referencing it with every known cosmic event, and still, no explanation came. Then, without warning, Voyager 1 initiated a subtle but measurable change in its trajectory, a deviation no one at NASA had commanded. And just like that, the question changed from "what did we hear?" to "who or what heard us?" Voyager 1 is powered by an aging radioisotope thermoelectric generator, and its ability to maneuver is limited to tiny adjustments through small thrusters, which haven't been used in years. But telemetry confirmed it. The spacecraft had altered its orientation, slightly but definitively, as though adjusting to better see or align with something in deep space. Engineers scrambled to determine whether it was the result of a pre-programmed fallback behavior, perhaps an outdated line of code finally triggering due to a sensor anomaly. But the logs showed no such command. More perplexing was the fact that this course change placed Voyager's camera array, which had been shut down since the 1990 pale blue dot image, facing a direction toward which no celestial object was known to exist. The area in question had no stars visible to the naked eye, no galaxies catalogued, no gravitational anomalies recorded. So why point there? What had Voyager seen in its instruments? And why had it reoriented so precisely? At a distance of over 15 billion miles from Earth, there is no autopilot, no corrections, no assistance, and yet Voyager made a decision. Or so it seems. What followed in the weeks after the trajectory shift was, if possible, even more disturbing. Voyager 1's transmissions began arriving with subtle alterations, minor distortions in signal timing and frequency that, upon closer inspection, revealed patterns embedded deep in the data stream. These were not transmission errors. They were intentional modulations, repeating across multiple packets, forming complex sequences reminiscent of binary logic and harmonic resonance. Scientists at JPL consulted cryptographers, AI experts, and linguists. Some suggested these patterns might represent a form of response, or recognition, as if Voyager was not just observing something, but being observed in return. The notion that the signal could be a two-way communication, one begun by Earth nearly 5 decades ago with the launch of the Golden Record, has raised unsettling possibilities. Could Voyager have encountered an intelligence that doesn't emit signals in our frequency bands, but instead uses gravitational waves, magnetic distortion, or some unknown medium to communicate? And if so, has that intelligence noticed us? Following the course correction and signal distortions, top-level meetings began to unfold behind closed doors at Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. A select team of physicists, engineers, and mission veterans were summoned to review the anomaly. What was originally considered a minor deviation quickly turned into a heated debate among experts. Some argued it was a last gasp from a dying spacecraft, a final error, a misfire of failing hardware. But others, looking at the consistency of the altered signal and the precise directional change, suggested something far more alarming. That Voyager 1 might have encountered an unknown gravitational or electromagnetic phenomenon, or worse, that it was responding to something not naturally occurring. With each new data burst received, patterns became harder to ignore. Geometric ratios, symmetrical intervals, and harmonic feedback hinted at deliberate structure, as if something was mirroring or mimicking the probe's activity. The JPL team, torn between skepticism and awe, found themselves asking a question no space agency is ever truly prepared to answer. What do we do if this isn't random? As whispers of the data leak reached the wider scientific community, a wave of independent analysis emerged from universities and observatories around the world. Several prominent physicists proposed a radical theory, that Voyager the 1st of May have entered a field of dark matter interaction, or even brushed against a region of space-time distortion, the kind hypothesized in the presence of massive gravitational anomalies or exotic astrophysical objects. But one paper in particular caused widespread discomfort. A group of AI researchers had used pattern recognition software to analyze the modified signal and found that it appeared to mirror aspects of the Arecibo message, the binary radio transmission humanity sent to the stars in 1974. Some of the sequences Voyager was now receiving had mathematical overlaps with that very message, raising the chilling possibility that some form of intelligence had received our signal, and was now responding, using Voyager as a relay. Was this a coincidence born of cosmic noise, or a cosmic reply? Beginning of a new epoch in human understanding, or the unraveling of what we believed to be a silent, indifferent cosmos? For so long, the vacuum of space had seemed cold and lifeless, a place where our machines could sail unchallenged, undisturbed, save for the natural laws that govern celestial bodies. But Voyager 1's recent behavior suggested that something, some force or presence, had taken notice. And this notion was not just unsettling. It was paradigm-shifting. As engineers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory huddled in increasingly private meetings, they began reassessing not just the data but the fundamental assumptions on which space exploration was founded. Suddenly, every piece of information from Voyager became sacred. Archive transmissions were combed through once more with fresh eyes, now burdened with the possibility that hidden in the static, buried in the binary noise, were clues we had missed. What if this anomaly wasn't new? What if Voyager had been hearing, or being heard, for years, and only now had it reached a threshold, a crossing point in space or understanding, that allowed it to act? Those who were once quick to dismiss the trajectory change as a simple technical glitch now found themselves revisiting earlier readings, subtle variances in magnetic field data, inconsistencies in plasma wave reports, unexpected dropouts that had been attributed to distance or system degradation. They wondered, were these not random after all? Had we been receiving a signal, a whisper from something far older, far more advanced, waiting to be recognized? The international scientific community, although still largely in the dark due to NASA's restricted release of information, had begun their own parallel investigations. Observatories in Europe, China, and South America had turned their instruments toward the section of sky Voyager now faced. Though no stars were visible in that sector, some reported faint anomalies, minute gravitational lensing effects, subtle ripples in background microwave radiation, the kinds of things that would typically go unnoticed. But now, under this new context, every deviation, no matter how slight, took on greater meaning. Independent teams of physicists speculated that the void in front of Voyager might not be empty at all. Perhaps it was cloaked. Or perhaps our instruments were not yet sophisticated enough to perceive what existed there. Then came another development. A sudden spike in the radiation data stream, followed by a brief blackout in transmission. For 13 hours, Earth heard nothing. Mission Control held its breath, fearing the worst, that Voyager had finally succumbed to the cold, or worse, that its encounter had concluded with its destruction. But then, as if nothing had happened, the signal resumed. And the next packet of data carried something unprecedented, a compressed burst of what could only be described as organized information. It wasn't telemetry. It wasn't instrument feedback. It appeared to be code, dense, self-repeating, structured. It was, according to some, too clean, too deliberate to be a mistake. The file was massive, taking days to fully decode even at high priority. What emerged left many stunned. Within the packet were not just data logs, but what looked like recursive patterns, visual grids, audio pulses, even frequency harmonics that matched musical notes. It was as though Voyager had received a file, a cosmic package, and had sent it back home. Some saw it as a form of reply. Others argued it could be a warning. But all agreed, this was not noise. At the United Nations, informal briefings began to take place behind closed doors. The possibility that an object launched in the 1970s might now serve as a bridge between Earth and an unknown intelligence raised not only scientific but geopolitical questions. Who owned Voyager? Who would lead the response? And more crucially, should we respond at all? Voices within the astrophysics community called for caution. If this was a form of contact, it might be unwise to presume benign intent. They invoked historical analogues, how uncontacted tribes had suffered after meeting more advanced civilizations. What if we were the tribe? What if the message wasn't a greeting but a test? A measurement of how far we'd come since sending that gilded disk into the stars? Others were more hopeful. They argued that intelligence capable of communicating across such distances likely operated on principles of understanding and curiosity. That perhaps the signal meant we were not alone, and never had been, and that such knowledge could elevate humanity from its current state of division and conflict. Imagine, they said, if the stars were watching, and we suddenly found reason to unify under shared awareness that we are part of a much larger system. As debates intensified, NASA authorized the assembly of a new interdisciplinary team. Composed of quantum theorists, linguists, computer scientists, theologians, and cultural historians, its purpose was not just to decode the signal but to prepare a possible message in return. But what do you say to something that may not think or perceive like we do? Would they understand language, or emotion, or mathematics as we do? The Golden Record had been an attempt to bridge such gaps, but now, decades later, we face the prospect of needing to create a new kind of communication, one not just across space, but across cognition. Interestingly, some argued the response might not need to come from humans at all. With advancements in artificial intelligence and machine learning, several researchers proposed training a neural network on Voyager's newly received signals, letting it learn patterns and simulate potential responses without human bias. It was, in effect, letting machines talk to whatever was out there, if anything at all. Skeptics feared that such an approach could lead to unintended consequences. What if the AI interpreted the message wrongly? What if it replied in a way that misrepresented us? But proponents argued we'd already sent Voyager out alone. Now, we were just giving it a mind. Meanwhile, amateur astronomers and conspiracy theorists latched onto the story, some leaking fragments of the anomalous signal online. Forums lit up with speculation. The course change was due to a tractor beam. The signal was a countdown. The dark void was a gateway, not a location. One theory even claimed that Voyager had passed near a Dyson sphere, an enormous artificial construct designed to harness a star's energy, now defunct and adrift in space. Meanwhile, amateur astronomers and conspiracy theorists latched onto the story, some leaking fragments of the anomalous signal online. Forums lit up with speculation. The course change was due to a tractor beam. The signal was a countdown. The dark void was a gateway, not a location. One theory even claimed that Voyager had passed near a Dyson sphere, an enormous artificial construct designed to harness a star's energy, now defunct and adrift in space. NASA refused to confirm or deny any of these claims, but internally, concerns mounted. If this was the beginning of a new chapter in cosmic interaction, was humanity ready? Our civilizations were still learning to coexist with themselves, still navigating climate disasters, inequality, and war. And yet here, quietly floating beyond the known, was a probe carrying not just our data, but possibly our introduction. And then came the final twist. Voyager 1's signal changed again. This time, rather than a hum or code or data stream, it broadcast a simple series of pulses. 12 beats. Then silence. 12 beats. Then silence. Over and over. And within the pulse, a modulation, a fluctuation that, when analyzed, matched the frequency of the hydrogen line, 1420 MHz, a frequency logarithed as a universal constant for initiating contact. In other words, it was the frequency of intentionality. Suddenly, the question wasn't just whether something had seen Voyager. It was whether that something now wanted us to respond. The world reacted with a strange mix of awe and dread. In the days following the rhythmic pulses from Voyager 1, media outlets cautiously reported on what was now being called the hydrogen signal. Governments released carefully worded statements, downplaying the phenomenon while quietly assembling contingency panels of their own. Citizens speculated wildly. Was it a beacon? A test? A warning? Religious leaders offered interpretations ranging from prophetic fulfillment to cosmic enlightenment. Social media turned the pulses into everything from viral dance remixes to deeply meditative soundscapes. But among scientists and those truly paying attention, there was no doubt anymore. Something was trying to communicate. Inside NASA's most secured labs, the pattern of the pulses was analyzed from every conceivable angle. While the beats were simple, 12 tones followed by silence, the structure within each pulse suggested an embedded complexity. Quantum physicists proposed that the waveform might contain compressed multidimensional data, intelligible only if interpreted outside traditional three-dimensional thinking. Linguists suggested that the repetition mirrored early human attempts at communication, like Morse code or even primitive drumming, meant to establish a shared baseline of recognition. Others wondered if the message wasn't linguistic at all, but emotional. Could the modulation of the pulses convey intention, curiosity, perhaps? Or empathy? Or threat? Still, the probe remained silent beyond those 12 tones. Voyager's trajectory stabilized, no longer deviating from its course, as if waiting, hovering in the void like a messenger frozen between delivery and reply. The silence became deafening. And then, without warning, a second change occurred. The golden record onboard Voyager, long thought to be inert, simply a symbolic gesture of goodwill, began to emit faint electromagnetic feedback. Not from space, but from Voyager itself. The probe had turned inward, broadcasting something toward its own disk, as if activating it. A loop. A handshake. Panic and exhilaration erupted in equal measure. Engineers scrambled to determine if Voyager had received new instructions, or if it had been reproposed by an external force. What would happen next was unknown, but one thing had become terrifyingly clear: we were no longer the sole narrators of our cosmic story. Something, or someone, was listening. And now, they were speaking. Whether we should answer remained the question that could define our species forever.